what would you say? Where is how does the circuit sort of what's the I have to think about this. What are like the main clubs in Egypt and main people you got to get in contact with if you want to be a if my name is Billy Bollocks, arrogant prick, and I wanted to do well in comedy in Egypt, where would I go in terms
Uh,
of big clubs and all
well,
that?
Billy would have to change bollocks to something more. Although the word bollocks is not as known in the Arabic culture, in the Arabic speaking culture, so could be all right with that name of bollocks. But it's ironic. We used to have a comedy club that started in the end of 2018, but then it closed its doors in 2019 just because it was badly located. Like it was located in this building which had these horribly painful like stairs that made you feel like you were doing three leg days in one. um but the venues that you approach are there are a couple of venues that they do entertainment and they do allow certain nights allotted for comedy. The way to get a night, like the way to get a part in doing comedy in Egypt would be approaching either Al Hizbil Comedy via their Facebook page or their Instagram page, the Comedy Bunch, again, either through their Facebook page or their Instagram account. Helmi Man Events, who organizes Comedy Bunker. And Mohammed Helmi actually organized Egypt's first ever and still does these roast nights. You know how there are those roast, I don't know if they have them, if they're big in the UK, like they are in the US, where like comedians, like two comedians are on stage and they try to roast each other. He started doing that in 2019 in Egypt. He did the first ever roast battle. There's never been a roast battle before, and he actually organized the first one. And now he actually has, I wouldn't say the monopoly, but nobody else seems to be doing as good a job as Muhammad Helmi on the roast battle comedy nights. But he also organizes it's basically through promoters that happen to also be comedians. That is how you would get your foot on the stage in an Egyptian circuit, is by approaching one of the key organizers. So at Hizbil the Comedy Bunch, which are from Alexandria. Helmi Man, who is also Alexandrian, but he's based in Cairo. And venues wise, like a venue that you would approach would be the Room, which is like a cultural hub place that they
Hmm.
organize comedy events. The library, the Alexandria Library, actually has from time to time done live comedy events, usually booked 6 or 7 months in advance. They have like different performances ongoing throughout the year. So if you wanted to perform at the Alexandria Library, you'd have to approach them. If you're overseas, you'd have to approach them at least 9 or 10 months before your proposed date. But there's not that many. There's like no comedy club now. There's no like Comedy Store or the Comedy Cellar or the Comedy Cafe or Bill Murray's or Camden Comedy Club. There's nothing like that here in Egypt.
One thing, how do you do comedy in Egypt in English as well as Egyptian?
I personally do my comedy in English. I can bring Arabic into my set for the audience's sake, but I mean, when I'm on stage in the UK or in Canada, I my material is completely in English. Very rarely do I speak Arabic in front of English speaking audiences. I don't feel too comfortable doing Arabic sets personally. That's just me. I don't feel that comfortable. I don't feel. I tried. I did try once in 2015 and failed miserably. Actually, I remember several times I tried doing comedy in Arabic and it was not successful because it's not my thing. But English speaking, that's my bag. That's where I feel comfortable at. Sometimes I'll be even the only English speaking act on the comedy lineup at a comedy night. Like there'll be all the other comedians are doing it in Arabic and I'm the only one that does it in English. So sometimes I actually have to turn down the dial on my English speaking and try to simplify certain bits to not having such elaborate gildings that the English speaker would appreciate, but that the English as a second language person wouldn't struggle with. So it can be a bit frustrating, a little bit.
So, okay. What what has been an interesting incident where you tried to do comedy in Egyptian? I mean,
Well, before that, there was actually a night where I was doing a comedy night. Like I was actually the headline act, and in the middle of my set, this girl puts her hand up, and it's like an automatic reaction. Like after years of being a teacher, when you see a hand up, you're just sort of like, it was like it took over my programming as a comedian, and suddenly the teacher me took over and was like, "Yes, you have a question." And she turned around, she said, "بتكلم العربي?" Which means, "Do you speak Arabic?" I'm like, "Yes." She goes, "طب why don't you do your set in Arabic?" And I just was like, I looked at the audience and I was like, "Is this for real?" And then suddenly, like one of the other comedians, he yanked down the projection screen, indicating that we were about to give a lesson because of the whole that moment of like the student raising her hand and the teacher answering. And it was just a weird moment. And even after that show, after shows I've had people walk up to me and say, like, why do you do your show in English? Why don't you do it in Arabic? And I'll be like, well, why do you assume that everyone in the audience who was laughing is not laughing to be polite, but they're laughing because they understood? Because I always feel like there's always that person that they struggle with English, so they presume that everybody else must be struggling with English, and that's why they say that, like, why don't you do your show in Arabic? But in terms of the Arabic, I think maybe I might, out of preservation and traumatic revelation, I might have compartmentalized the 2 or 3 times I attempted doing. I mean, I remember one time I was booked for a corporate show and the audience was guaranteed Arabic speaking. So, and at that time there were English speaking acts, but I couldn't recruit any of them for the night. So I got 2 other Arabic speakers that they came and they performed. And I tried doing my material in Arabic, and the audience was just, what was weird about the audience, Marvin, was that they were almost, I don't know if it was because their superiors and their bosses were in the audience with them, that they felt that if they're not allowed to laugh at work, they're also not allowed to laugh at a comedy night, even though their bosses hired a comedian who in turn hired 2 other comedians. So there's 3 comedians. And the first comedian who went on, he was like, he performed his best material, come off, and it was like, it's so weird. It's like they didn't want to laugh. And I was actually studying the audience. They were almost covering their faces, covering their mouths. Like they didn't want to be seen as laughing. That was like one of the weirdest, trippiest things I'd ever seen. And the headline act, he came on, started doing his strongest material at the very start. Again, audience were reluctant to laugh, but suddenly they just started to warm up to that concept. They understood the concept, and then they started to allow themselves to laugh. And by the end of his set, they were laughing out loud. So it was just one of those. I think sometimes there might be people in the demographics of the population that are unaware of the concept of what stand-up comedy is in Egypt. So that's why the concept of somebody standing up and telling jokes that are not hack gags, Like, you know, the one-liner comedians of "Take my wife, please. I take my wife everywhere. She always finds her way home." You know, my wife said to me, "Take me somewhere I've never been before." I said, "All right, I'll take you to the kitchen." What's his name? That comedian who said all those jokes. He was in Goodfellas as well. Point is, like, when you're like one of those one-liner comedians and the whole audience is used to it, there's that culture of comedy or expecting comedy. But sometimes Egypt is one of those countries where you'll have the audiences hungering for comedy, and then they'll be like, "What is comedy? I can make you laugh. Why do I need to pay money to see you laugh? I can make you laugh." It's like that, you know, like, how many actors does it take to change a light bulb? 10, one to do it and the other 9 to say, "I could have done that better."
Pretty much, yeah.
The same mindset here in Egypt sometimes with audience members. But next question, my brother.